Hey friends, Pastor Bill Walden here. Build up the church. This is a devotional word for July 25th, 2024. This is out of the book of Acts, chapter 27. Paul is en route to Rome, and as we saw in our last episode, he and his traveling companions, 276 people in all on a ship traveling to Rome. They've been going through storms, and it's been very difficult. They've been fearing for their lives, but an angel of the Lord came and spoke to Paul and said, "No, you're gonna make it to Rome. You're gonna stand before Caesar." And so Paul has been speaking to the captain of the ship and the centurion that was guarding prisoners on the ship and encouraging them. And yet the storms are continuing, and so we see here two things in this little episode that we're going to have together. Paul believes the promise of God, but he's not inactive in his pursuit of the promise of God. There's a possibility that if you're a Christ follower, that God has given you a promise, for instance, to provide for your needs, and so you believe that, but then you just sit on the couch, wait for money to fall out of the sky. Instead, God will provide for your needs as He leads you to a job you work, and He provides for your needs. Sometimes money does arrive in the mailbox, but other times we need to go out and cooperate with the promise of God. And so we see that happening here with Paul. Let me read you the story. We are in Acts chapter 27. It says this. Then, fearing lest we should run aground on the rocks, they dropped four anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And so they're heading towards land. They're actually heading towards the island of Malta, but they didn't know where they were. They didn't know what kind of coastline they were going to be approaching, and they don't want to crash into rocks that they can't see at night. So they drop the anchors and they wait offshore for daytime, so they can see where they're going. But it says this, and as the sailors were seeking to escape the ship, when they had let the skiff into the sea, under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow, Paul said to the centurions and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the skiff and let it fall. So these guys want to take the little lifeboat, if you will, and this is the crew, and they want to escape and save themselves. But they were needed to guide the ship closer into the shore. They're going to beach the ship. They're going to go as far as they can and then pray to hit a sandbar, get stuck, and then swim a short distance. But the crew didn't want to wait. And so they're thinking of themselves. They're not thinking about the Roman centurions and the soldiers and the prisoners, or they're not thinking of anything else except themselves. Paul has received the promise, Paul, you're going to make it to Rome. He believes that. But he's also taking action. As a Christian, we need to do both things as God would lead. Now, walking in the Spirit, walking into the leading of the Holy Spirit is a moving target, to be sure. Sometimes God calls us to great activity, at other times He calls us to no activity and just to wait and He'll do something. This was a time when Paul needed to believe the promise of God but also be involved. As it says in the book of James, faith without works is dead. Paul had faith, but he needed to work at bringing this promise of God to conclusion. We carry on in the story. And as day was about to dawn, Paul implored them all to take food, saying, "Today is the 14th day you have waited and continued without food, and you've eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you to take nourishment, for this is for your survival, since not one hair will fall from the head of any of you." You need to eat so that you can survive, but God's already promised that you will survive. But you still need to eat so that you'll survive. See, both things are happening there. Paul has every confidence in the promise of God, but he's urging them and himself to eat because they need the strength to face what they're going to be doing. When he had said these things, he took bread, gave thanks to God in the presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then they were all encouraged and also took food themselves. So in this short little vignette, it's just simply this. God made Paul a promise, but Paul was not inactive. He didn't sit on some seat in the ship and say, "Oh, well, God's will be done." He wasn't inactive in the promise of God. He was active in pursuing the promise of God. He wasn't making something happen. He couldn't make anything happen. But he also didn't just sit passively and wait for something to happen. So whatever's going on in your life, whatever you feel God is leading you to do, there are times, yes, when we sit and we wait for the Lord to do something. stand and see the deliverance of the Lord, but there are other times when God would have us to be active. So, and we have to grow in our faith. We have to mature in our faith to be able to differentiate times of activity, times of waiting. But in this instance, Paul clearly, it's a time for activity. It's a time to pursue the promise of God through works of faith. So, some things to think about. Thanks for watching.